1,142 hours of recycled oxygen. 800 meters of hydrostatic pressure trying to crush the Dolphin 2's hull like an aluminum can. My codename was Echo 7, and my job was to be the invisible ear of a war the world didn't yet know it was losing. The TV said the incident in the Strait of Hormuz was just a tanker's mechanical failure. They lied to you. I was there, sitting in the absolute silence of the muddy seabed, when my carbon fiber headphones picked up granular static, the acoustic signature of an autonomous sabotage system that only 3 people on the planet were supposed to know about. The trigger for the next great global nightmare isn't coming from missiles or radars on the surface. It's armed at a depth no one dares to monitor, waiting for the exact moment to detonate the world order. What I'm about to reveal to you now is the record of a mission that was erased from all official reports. A truth so heavy it nearly cost me the air I breathe and my very soul at the bottom of that abyss. Listen to every detail with the utmost attention, because what I heard in the dark changed my understanding of reality. If you're one of those who feels that something is terribly wrong in the world's silence, understand what's really happening in the shadows. Time is running out, and the magnetic click has already been triggered. Sit here, my son. Come closer to the fire. The heat of the embers is a comfort to those who, like me, have felt the cold that doesn't come from winter, but from oblivion. The human body, you know it, don't you? The scriptures call our flesh a tent, a temporary structure made of cloth and stakes that the wind of life lashes until the threads loosen. My tent, well, it's quite worn now, the seams are opening. But there was a time when my tent wasn't made of skin and bone, but of Israeli steel and absolute silence. I was what they called Echo 7, a nameless face for a man who lived on the underside of the world. I was an acoustics specialist, hidden in the bowels of a Dolphin 2-class submarine, lying in the dark silt of the Strait of Hormuz. Down there, my son, time doesn't run, it crawls. The air we breathe isn't God's, it's recycled breath, tasting like old metal and diesel fuel, scratching the throat and making you forget the smell of wet earth. I lived to listen. My ears were my prayer and my curse. I cataloged the heartbeat of the ocean, the rotation of massive tankers' propellers, the pulse of Iranian frigates crossing the surface like blind predators. I knew those captains' sins just by the sound of their engines. We were ghosts, do you understand? Digital shadows protecting invisible borders under a pressure that would turn an ordinary man into dust in seconds. But that day? That day. The pressure didn't just come from the water. The air felt heavier, as if the ocean itself were trying to expel us. I was at my console, the emerald glow of the screens reflected in the sweat on my forehead, when I heard it. It wasn't a whale's song or the crackle of a school of fish. It was something unnatural. A granular static, fine, as if someone were chewing glass right behind my left eardrum. I adjusted the filters, my hands shaking slightly. What I was capturing was a ghost pulse. A massive displacement mass moving without engine noise, a black hole in the water. At that moment, the fear wasn't just tactical, it was a cold dread that crept up my spine. The sound of magnetic clicks began to fill my headphones, like an infestation of metallic insects spreading across the seabed. They were autonomous mines, a trap set by hands that shouldn't have been there. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a pressure that wasn't hydrostatic. The recycled air suddenly ran thin. The commander was shouting orders in the distance, but his voice sounded as if he were submerged in oil. The radar pips became a single, high-pitched note, piercing my skull. "Ignore the error, Echo 7, he said. But I knew. I heard the apocalypse clock ticking in those forbidden frequencies. Cold sweat ran down inside my vest, and my heart, that tired old engine, began to skip beats. Each beat was a monumental effort, as if I were trying to turn the submarine's propeller with my bare hands. The pain came like an incandescent blade, starting from my arm and moving up my neck. The taste of metal in my mouth became unbearable. The console lights began to blur. The emerald green was replaced by a gray mist. I tried to reach the transmission button, tried to warn that the match had already been struck, and that the world above was about to burn. But my fingers no longer obeyed. The sound of granular static was the last thing my physical ears recorded. The submarine, my iron tent, seemed to shrink. The noise of the machinery, the smell of diesel, the agony of metal under pressure. Everything grew distant, very distant. My chest stopped rising, the effort to exist ceased, and, in a sigh that never quite escaped, I felt the thread loosen. I was no longer sitting in that metal chair. I was sliding, leaving the tent, heading toward a silence that no sonar would ever be able to measure. At that exact moment, the world of men was left behind, and I took my first step into the dark, toward the unknown. The dark. You know, my son, we spend our whole lives afraid of it. But that dark, at the moment my tired heart took its last breath, wasn't the cold, lifeless dark of the bottom of the strait. It wasn't the darkness that suffocates or hides the enemy. It was like the embrace of a mother you hadn't seen in a long time. A silence that wasn't empty, understand? It was a silence full of presence. The first thing I felt was relief. Oh, the relief. You know when you take a heavy burden off your back after walking miles in the sun? Well then, imagine taking off the weight of an entire submarine. The pressure that crushed my chest, that searing pain that seemed to want to tear my soul from my flesh, it simply evaporated. I felt light. So light that gravity seemed like an old joke, a rule of a world I no longer needed to follow. I looked down, if down even meant anything in that compassless place. I saw my iron tent, the Dolphin 2, down there, resting in the silt. From a distance it looked so small, so insignificant. A metal toy forgotten in the back of a dusty drawer. I saw the man sitting in the control chair, headphones still on his ears, his pale face reflecting the green of the screens that now said nothing. That was Echo 7. But I was no longer that number. I was just me. And then, my son, the horizon changed. There was no more steel, no bulkheads, no omnipresent smell of diesel fuel. The darkness of the ocean began to be broken by a clarity I had never seen in any sunrise on the surface. It wasn't a light that hurt the eyes, understand. It was a light that knew me. A light that seemed made of pure goodness and a welcome I didn't know existed. It came from all sides, warm like this fire here, but without burning. And the sound. Ah, the sound. Remember that granular static, that noise of broken glass that was killing me in the headphones? It was gone. In its place, a murmur began to emerge. At first, it sounded like the noise of many waters, like a distant waterfall or the sea hitting the sand on a night of absolute peace. But as I moved forward, or rather, as I was drawn by that light, the sound transformed. It was as if the air itself were singing. These weren't words I could repeat now with this tired voice, but I understood what they were saying. They were saying that the fight was over, that the vigil had come to an end. I felt like a castaway who, after days of fighting the waves, finally feels firm sand under his feet. But it wasn't sand. It was something more solid than iron, more real than the very life I had left behind at the bottom of the sea. I was crossing the veil, my son. You know that heavy curtain that separates what we see from what we only intuit in prayer? It opened. And what was on the other side? We spend our lives trying to describe it with theology, but words are like old nets that can't hold the wind. The peace. It wasn't just the absence of war or noise. It was a force, a substance. I took a deep breath. For the first time in decades, I didn't taste the metal or the recycled oxygen. I breathed something pure, something that seemed to feed not just the lungs, but the very essence of my being. The fear of magnetic mines, the dread of world war, the terrible secret I carried, all of that became small, so small that it vanished in the glow of that new day that knew no sunset. I continued floating toward the center of that light. With every moment, the sense of belonging increased. I wasn't an intruder there. I wasn't a spy hidden in the dark trying not to be noticed. I was a guest. More than that, I was a son coming home after a very, very long and tiring journey. That was when I stopped. The sound of many waters grew stronger, but now it had a harmony, a cadence that made my new heart vibrate. I felt a presence. It wasn't a cold, metallic displacement mass like what I had seen on the sonar. It wasn't an acoustic ghost. It was something alive. So alive that life on Earth seemed like a pale shadow, an unfinished sketch. I wasn't alone there, on the threshold of that glory. I felt, with all the certainty of my being, that someone was waiting for me. Someone who knew every beat of my heart, every mistake I made in the dark, and every silent prayer I said while the submarine groaned under the water's pressure. I looked ahead, and in the midst of that infinite clarity, a silhouette began to form. And what I felt at that moment? Ah, my son. What I felt was something that no man is prepared to endure without falling to his knees. I realized with a tremor of holy reverence that my lonely mission in the dark was finally over, because the light, in person, had come to get me. Come a little closer. The embers are crackling, aren't they? That sound. It reminds me of the beginning of everything I saw in that moment. You know, my son, I spent years listening to the world through electronic filters, trying to distinguish what was life from what was machine. But there, before that light I told you about, the filters fell away. I didn't need sonar anymore. I was seeing with my heart, and what I saw would change the most hardened man on earth. In the center of that infinite clarity, he was there. I didn't see a face like mine or yours, drawn by lines and shadows. I saw a presence. It was as if all the goodness that has ever existed in the world since Adam's first breath had gathered in a single point. And that point had the shape of a man. Jesus. The name I had so often spoken out of habit or fear was now the only reality that mattered. I fell, or rather, my soul prostrated itself. Do you know what it's like to feel that every secret of yours, every little lie, every grudge kept in the dark of a submarine is exposed? I felt my sin. I felt the weight of being Echo 7, the man who lived in the shadows. But the instant the dread of judgment touched me, something greater happened. His love. It didn't come as a sentence, it came as a wave. Imagine, my son, a tide of warm, crystal-clear water that rises and washes away all the silt, all the grease, all the taste of metal from the soul. I felt a forgiveness that made no sense. He knew me. He knew about the secret mission. He knew about the magnetic mines down there. He even knew the thoughts I had when the oxygen began to run out. And even knowing everything, he loved me with a fury of tenderness that I cannot explain. There were no words spoken with lips. There was no sound in the air, understand? It was a deep knowing. His voice echoed within me like the sound of 1,000 harps playing in unison under the ocean. "Do not fear," he said without moving a finger. And in that sacred silence, he showed me a truth that no intelligence service could ever decipher. He showed me that while I was down there, worried about the ghost pulse and the war of men, he was holding the abyss with his own hands. I saw that every propeller turn, every mine click, every movement in the dark, nothing escaped his gaze. The world is not an accident of political forces, my son. The world is a garden he tends, even when the garden is covered by 1,000 meters of salt water. I understood that my life wasn't a number. I wasn't just a disposable acoustics operator. I was a son. And in that embrace of light, I wanted to stay. Oh, how I wanted to. I wanted to dissolve into that peace, forget the Strait of Hormuz, forget the Dolphin too, forget that I ever had a body that felt pain. I was home. Finally, I was home. But then, the harmony changed. The sound of many waters began to recede, like a tide deciding to go back to the deep sea. I felt a tightening, a pull back to the cold. The light began to distance itself, and his voice, so sweet and so firm, resonated one last time in the depths of my being. "Not yet, my little one. Your vigil still has one last station. Go back and tell them that I hear even what the silence tries to hide." The pain. The pain came back in a snap. The weight of the world fell upon me as if the entire ocean had decided to crush me at once. The golden glow was replaced by the sickly green of the console screens. The smell of holiness vanished, giving way to the acrid smell of diesel fuel and sweat. I drew air, and it came tearing, cold and metallic, straight into my lungs that had already forgotten what it was like to breathe on Earth. I was back, my son, back to the steel tomb, but with a fire burning inside me that no water in the world could ever extinguish. The return. Ah, my son, the return was the hardest part. Imagine being immersed in an ocean of honey and light, where there is no weight, no time, no fear. And suddenly, being grabbed by an iron hand and pulled back inside a rusty suit of armor. That's how I felt. The pull was violent. I felt my soul being squeezed, returning to the narrow limits of that tent of flesh I call my body. I didn't wake up in the submarine. When my eyes finally opened, the emerald green of the consoles had been replaced by the sterile white of a hospital room. The smell was no longer diesel fuel, but antiseptic and sickness. But the biggest difference, you see, was the weight. Earth's gravity felt like a hard hand crushing my shoulders against the mattress. I felt every bone, every scar, every irregular beat of my tired heart. I was alive, but earthly life seemed small. It felt like a shoe that was too tight for someone who had already walked barefoot on the roads of heaven. The beep of the heart monitor next to my bed. It had the same rhythm as the sonar. Beep, beep, beep. But now, I was no longer hunting enemies in the dark. I was listening to time passing. The doctors spoke of a miracle, of a prolonged cardiorespiratory arrest and unexplained recovery. They looked at the charts and tried to translate into science what only faith can embrace. They didn't know that while my body was there, motionless, I was being instructed by the author of life himself. You know, my son, after that day, Echo 7 died. I came back, but I was no longer the man who lived in the shadows. The official report of what happened in the Strait of Hormuz? They say it was a mechanical failure. They say the mines never existed. I signed all the papers they gave me, all the silence agreements. They think they're keeping a state secret, but the secret I carry is much bigger. They keep secrets of war. I keep a secret of peace. My view of death changed completely. Before, death was the silent enemy I tried to avoid with technology and radars. Today I see death only as a door we pass through when our tent can no longer hold the wind. I'm no longer afraid of the dark, or the abyss, or the end. How could I be afraid of going home? Life out here, it's important, yes, but it's just the rehearsal. The real concert happens there, where light has no shadow. Look at me now. Look into the eyes of this old man who has already seen the underside of the world. I have a message for you, and I ask you to keep it in the depths of your soul for when your own waters get rough. Listen carefully. Don't spend your days setting mines of resentment or hiding behind bulkheads of pride. The world up there, and down here, is in a hurry to hate, but eternity only has time for love. Forgive. Forgive quickly. Don't take a grudge to bed, because a grudge is a weight that doesn't pass through the veil. What I saw there, what I felt in that embrace of light, was that the only thing we really take with us is what we gave away for free. Love is the only baggage that doesn't weigh you down at the moment of departure. Love people as if you were listening to their hearts on a sonar, searching for the sign of life in the midst of the noise. Do not despair over the storms that appear on TV or the rumors of war. The owner of the sea is in control. He hears your whisper in the middle of the hurricane, and he knows your name, even if the world calls you only by a number. Trust him. The light that found me in the Strait of Hormuz is the same one that wants to light your path today. The fire is dying down. The embers are turning gray. It's time to rest. But go in peace, my son. Feel that heat in your chest and know that no matter how deep the ocean you find yourself in, you will never be alone. There is a love that holds the abyss. There is a silence that heals. And there is a house full of light and music waiting for all of us at the end of the vigil. Stay in peace. The night is long, but the dawn I saw, that dawn never ends. Sleep soundly. He is taking care of everything.